Jesse Temple is here, Badger Connect. His content is outstanding. I can't recommend it enough. The Camp, you hear him on the podcast with Zach as well. I thought they did an excellent job breaking down this Michigan game. Now, this only means so much, Jesse, but let's start very, very focused here. The what went right portion of your episode of The Camp with Zach was much longer this week than it has been in the past couple of weeks. So before we start complaining, let's start with that. It seems like you guys saw more good things in this game than in the last few.
I think that's fair to say, largely because the bar was set so low the previous two games. Obviously, the opening series offensively was tremendous. The best opening drive of the Luke Fickell era, considering the circumstances. It's a 12-play, 75-yard touchdown drive where the offensive line, which has felt like a makeshift unit every week because of injuries or ineffectiveness, moved a bunch of dudes. Hunter Simmons comes out in his first start, completes all three of his passes, and Wisconsin takes a 7-0 lead. You can't ask for anything better than that. Of course, Michigan goes down and scores a touchdown, but I did think defensively, this unit helped keep Wisconsin in the game. To me, I wrote about this in the preview on Friday before the game, but best case scenario was that the defense would perform at a higher level and give the team a chance in the second half because we knew it was going to be a struggle offensively. And of course, it was. After that opening touchdown drive, there were 9 consecutive drives for the offense that resulted in 8 punts and an interception before that late field goal.
So there's some things that fans or media people like me complain about. And I'm sure people within the program would say, that's such a, that's why are you complaining about that? That's such a, the idea, however, that you have your best drive of the Luke Fickell era and then you replace the quarterback on the first play of the next series. Like it's just weird. Like, I don't think that's a rudimentary dumb fan complaint. Like, what did you make of that? Or what did Luke Fickell say specifically about that?
I think it was part of the plan going into the week. Hey, we're going to give Hunter Simmons the start. Danny O'Neill's going to be part of the plan. We're going to use him at the start of the second drive. But I also think you have to take into account what's happening in the moment. And again, you did have your best drive. On the other hand, he was only in for one play. He only played a handful of snaps. There was another sequence that I believe was third down, and they kind of used him as a decoy so they could give the ball to Dylan Jones for a first down. I think it's just another thing you can stack up to a bunch of other things that haven't worked well. And we'll see what they do this week because Hunter Simmons, presumably, the expectation is get the start again. Will they use Danny O'Neill and in what capacity this week?
So a complaint that I have about Jeff Grimes, and you and Zach have talked about this, this goes all the way back to week 1. I remember driving home in the rain, in the dark, listening to the radio call in the first quarter, and the color commentator, who I think is Tauscher, I believe, was like, yeah, there's so much misdirection and there's so much, they really want everything to look the same. And I remember being in the car and like, well, they're playing at the time. Who would it have been? Miami, Ohio? I'm like, well, they should just be able to move this team. I understand misdirection when it's necessary and trickery when it's necessary, but like they should just be able to move this team. And I thought they showed on that opening drive that this line, which had a little shuffling, was capable of moving guys. And I just feel like Jeff Grimes has the tendency to gild the lily when maybe he doesn't have to. Can you talk about that? Because I know you and Zach have discussed that before too.
I felt it was a lot more what you're used to seeing against Michigan. I didn't think there were as many plays that felt out of place, if you will. There was a lot of that in Maryland, and Luke Fickell talked about this. They have to strike a balance. Sometimes there is that thought of we have to make something happen now, and you try to hit the home run. And some of those plays actually work in practice. They just haven't worked in the games. But against Michigan, there was some of that, and the wide receiver jet sweeps and reverses, that's going to continue to be a part of the offense. I thought there was less of it. Problem is, over the course of a 4-quarter game, they can't effectively run the ball. Look at the numbers against Michigan, including a touchdown drive. Unfortunately, you had to play the rest of the game. They averaged 2.7 yards a carry. They're averaging 3 yards a carry this season, which is one of the worst in the country. Offensively, they're not good. And certainly you would think they'd be better if Billy Edwards Jr. was healthy. We don't know what that would look like. He's barely played, which has, again, been an issue for Wisconsin throughout the Luke Fickell era, not having the starting quarterback. On the other hand, it's your job to have enough players ready that can still be functional afterward. And they're like 118th nationally in run offense and 126th in total offense, which is not going to get it done in this league or really any other.
I remember Fickell before the year saying this offense can go as far as these running backs will take us. It was something along those lines, right? Through 5 games, have these backs lived up to the expectations that you had before the season started?
Of course not. I mean, Dylan Jones had some nice moments in that game against Michigan, but statistically, we haven't seen a lot, and it's hard to know how much is it the inability to run block.
Sure.
Wisconsin's best running backs were tremendously talented, and they could, as the saying goes, make you wrong or make you right if you were wrong in how you blocked. But you also had guys who could open holes, so a running back is 3 yards down the field before he's touched or 5 yards down the field. I can't say I've seen that a lot. And again, there is great talent there with Dylan Jones and Darian Dupree, but you have to be able to translate it, and you have to have the ability to make something happen when it's not there. And again, I just that combination of factors has created a significant challenge in the run game.
In your evaluation, is it that second thing? Do you see star potential in Pop that's not being realized because of the lack of run blocking? Or do you think these backs just maybe aren't as good as we hoped? Or probably a
Uh,
combination of both.
Uh, I think it's too early to say just a blanket statement of they're not as good as we thought they were going to be. I mean, those
Okay.
guys were four-star running backs for a reason. Darian Dupree was the backup running back at the end of his true freshman season. This is the first year that Dylan Jones is getting any reps. He only played, I think, 16 snaps a year ago, got some late snaps against Purdue, and that was really all we saw. So I don't think it's fair to write off either of those guys, but it's a transition period in a new offense with an offensive line that has just been all over the place. I mean, you had your fourth center in the game, you had your third quarterback in the game, and that doesn't make it easy if you're a running back.
Jesse Temple is here, Badger Connect, and listen to him on the camp with Zach as well. You mentioned this on the camp, so not just to continue to parrot your takes, but I like picking your brain with things that you've engaged with and topics that you've hit. I thought the defense played better in this game. They did give up 445 yards of total offense to Michigan, and my fear, and you mentioned this too, is if you give up 445 yards to Ohio State or Oregon, the final score is not going to be 24-10. You know what I mean? So watching the defensive performance maybe seem like a step in the right direction. What are some areas that they still have to continue to get better if they're going to be even competitive with some of these elite opponents throughout October?
I'd like to say everything, but certainly the pass defense. They've given up too many big plays, and it continues to be an issue. Statistically, run defense, they've been pretty good. Now, I thought it was interesting that first series, Michigan goes down and scores a touchdown and has 54 yards rushing on the drive, and Wisconsin came into the game ranking number one in the country in run defense by allowing 50 yards a game. I think for the most part, Wisconsin did a decent job, but some teams have really been able to take advantage of them on the outside. And when you're talking about the Ohio States and the Oregons of the world, my goodness, those guys have an opportunity to thrive, kind of like what we saw in the Alabama game, where it's like, all right, we probably can run the ball, but we don't need to. Now, Oregon and Ohio State, those offenses, they can really put it on you in a variety of ways. But I think you start there and just playmaking ability. They have not generated enough takeaways. Sometimes it's bad luck because we know Michigan put the ball on the ground multiple times and Wisconsin didn't come up with it. Wisconsin had 3 early interceptions this season, and they just have not been able to generate the takeaways that are necessary to stem the tide and really change momentum in a game against a team that you're not supposed to beat.
Explain the importance, emphasize the gravity of this Iowa game and how badly this program needs it on Saturday.
I mean, this is as big of a deal as it gets, other than Minnesota, because it's Minnesota and PJ Fleck and whatever else you want to put there. And the fact Wisconsin won that rivalry for 15 straight years. The entire offseason was spent focusing on the 2 losses to Iowa and Minnesota, but Iowa in particular, and the number 42, and the fact Wisconsin lost 42-10 a year ago in Iowa City, gave up 329 yards rushing. And I've said this before, but it felt like they had 5 running backs that all looked like they could have been Heisman Trophy winners based on how they performed in that game. When you had a quarterback who you knew wasn't going to throw the ball much, it didn't matter. That was the most run yards Wisconsin's defense had given up in 13 years or 12 years since that Rose Bowl against Oregon, which is just astounding when you knew Iowa was only going to do one thing. So the workout process this offseason focused on doing a lot of like number 42 push-ups here in the spring, other things in the weight room. So if you come out here and you lay an egg and you give up a bunch of points and you don't do the things you spent all offseason talking about, I don't know what's left for you. Now, I expect them to put together a strong performance because they have to. Their backs are against the wall. This is a really important rivalry matchup with 2 programs that traditionally have done things in a very similar fashion. There's a lot of respect that goes both ways. And this is a good Iowa team and a really good Iowa defense, which we've grown accustomed to. Iowa has 2 losses. The record doesn't look great, but those 2 losses came against Iowa State and Indiana, teams with a combined 1 loss right now. And those losses came by a total of 8 points. So you have to know what you're getting into, and you have to put together a performance that shows why you spent all offseason thinking about this game.
Now, I remain over the moon about Badger basketball. I'm very excited to watch this team. You have a Badger bite out in a story. You met with John Blackwell and talked about this last offseason and what's coming next. So tell us your impressions of John Blackwell going into year 3 now, I believe, right? Year 3, and how Badgers fans should feel about his role. We presume as that guy, right? Like it was Tanjay last year. And unless one of these transfers, takes Wisconsin by storm again, like this is Blackwell's team and this is his season.
Yeah, they should feel great about John. On Tuesday, he was named one of 10 players in the league to the preseason All Big Ten team. That's a tremendously high honor. Now you have to go out and back it up during the season. But last year was a breakout year for him where he is a starting point guard. Now I think there's going to be more freedom for him to operate because they brought in Nick Boyd from the transfer portal who can play point guard and make John be off the ball a little more. And so I'm really interested and eager to see this basketball team that has so many new faces, 9 new players, but you still have John Blackwell and Nolan Winter to help lead the charge. And John, that NBA experience or that offseason working out for pro teams and being in Los Angeles, I think is going to pay big dividends this season.
Get old and stay old. Would you have said that they accomplished that goal again this offseason with the way they turn the roster over as many teams have to in this era of college athletics?
I would say so. You still have to have a core nucleus returning, and then Blackwell and Winter and Jack Janicki, who played last year, and Blackwell and Winter are both juniors, but you got 5 transfer portal players. Yes, there are 4 freshmen, and those guys are vital to this program. But to have people with experience like Boyd, who I mentioned is on his 3rd school, it feels like a million years ago, but he helped guide Florida Atlantic to a Final Four several years ago. Obviously, Andrew Rohde is on his 3rd team. All these guys have college experience, and that matters a ton when you get into these tough games.
What can we look for at Badger Connect this weekend around the Iowa game, and then with you and Zach on the camp as well?
Yeah, so I've got a story running Thursday. It's a profile of John Audius, who's been the play-by-play announcer for Wisconsin's volleyball and women's basketball teams, and it's really a look at how he became one of the best play-by-play announcers in the sport of volleyball, coming from someone who didn't know a thing about it when he began the job. I'll have a preview of the Wisconsin Iowa game. I'll be at that game on Saturday night to write about whatever may happen. And then the next Badger Bites, just as a teaser, I'm really excited about this. I sat down with Kelly Sheffield, the volleyball coach, for a film review. He put together 19 plays that highlighted what they're trying to do with their system and went through everything and explained it, hopefully in layman's terms to people like myself and others who may not understand volleyball and all the intricacies. And I think that's really cool to get an inside look at one of the best coaches in the sport for a team right now that is absolutely on fire. Have won 10 straight matches as we're talking in 30 of the last 32 sets played.
Well, and I know it's a team that a lot of people follow and watch, so that content for a lot of our listeners will be appreciated. Jesse, I appreciate you and your time. Enjoy the Iowa game on Saturday, and let's hope it's not a dud. And I don't think it will be, but I don't know what to expect sometimes with this team anymore.
Fair to say. Thanks, Grant. Talk soon.